Whatever you have here is unholy and must be destroyed.
Hey everyone, my name's Kenny. Welcome to the Strangeland channel. Today's video is different than what we've done in the past, but do not worry, we are doing the same thing that we normally do. Next week we are releasing a full video on Grant Amato. Today we are going to release something a little bit more experimental, some shorter videos. As you can tell by the runtime, it's shorter and it's just a little bit more easier to take in. It's just going to be me today, Kenny. Sometimes it might be Stefan, sometimes it might be me doing these. If you like them, let us know in the comments. If you don't, let us know in the comments. Like I said, it does not take away from what we normally do. Next week we are releasing a full episode. Just something we wanted to try today. And today we are talking about something a little bit disturbing, like we normally do, I suppose. We are talking about Joel Guy Jr. This is kind of a hot topic right now. There's not a huge database to give me all of the information, so I really had to piece it together from a lot of different sources. And if for some reason there's something you know that I don't know, let me know in the comments, because I'm definitely not going to be able to cover everything in today's video. But to start this case, we need to go back to Thanksgiving 2016, or just right after Thanksgiving 2016. 28-year-old Joel Guy Jr. had been visiting his family at the house he grew up in Hardin Valley, Tennessee, which is about a 20-minute drive from Knoxville, Tennessee, and it sits in Knox County. He had been visiting his father, Joel Guy Sr., and his mother, Lisa Guy. Joel Sr. was 61 years old and Lisa was 55, and he had 3 half-sisters. Full sisters, I have a half-sister. She's basically just my sister. So his sisters told investigators that everything was fine during the Thanksgiving visit, but we will soon find out it was the opposite of fine. Joel Jr. would kill his parents soon after Thanksgiving. He would dismember them, and he would attempt to dissolve his parents' bodies in tubs of acid. So let's get into it. Joel Guy Jr. was born in 1988, and he graduated from a high school for gifted students in 2006. From what I've seen online, he seemed to be a pretty bright student according to his peers from high school, and he would take classes at Louisiana State University for 9 years, which is a very long time to go to school and not have anything really to show for it. He stopped taking classes in 2015. Joel Sr. was a civil engineer, and he was planning to retire with his wife soon, so they could finally relax after decades of working and taking care of their 4 children. When I say taking care of their 4 children, I mostly mean Joel Jr. Joel never really had a job, and again, he was taking classes for 9 years, so that's mostly what he was doing. Joel Jr. had his own apartment in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but that was paid for by his parents. His mother had actually already retired, really, but she had picked up another job just to pay for Joel Jr.'s bills, including his rent. Lisa and Joel Sr., like I said, had been planning on retiring, and they had been planning to cut Joel Jr. off from any money at all. They were planning on buying or building a new house, I believe buying and finally enjoying life for once, without jobs, without kids to take care of. Again, they were, getting to that age where they just want to try to relax. The idea for Joel Jr. of actually having to get a job and live out his life without any help from his parents seemed too much for him to bear. He decided it would be much easier to kill them and get the insurance money. But it wasn't as easy as he believed it to be. When watching the trial, Joe Jr. comes off very smug. It always seems like he thinks he's the most intelligent and important person in the room, and it seems as if he truly believed that these murders would be easy for him to get away with. He believed he was planning these murders out meticulously, and he wrote all of his plans in a notebook that he did not get rid of. In this notebook, he described step by step how he was going to murder his parents, from the actual killing part to the dismemberment part, and how he would get rid of the bodies. On Wednesday 23rd, the day before Thanksgiving, 2016, Joel showed up to his parents' house. he was only supposed to stay until Friday, according to his sisters. As I said before, his sisters said that Joel Jr. seemed to be fine that day, but they also said that he seemed happy and energetic as well, which they would say was very unusual for him. He normally kept to himself and was pretty silent, shy, but he seemed fine. And I guess seeming fine for him was a bit out of the ordinary. He did not leave Friday like he told his sisters he would do, but he would stay until that Sunday. On Saturday, November 26th, Joel Jr. killed his father first by stabbing him to death 40 times when he came upstairs into the exercise room of the house while his mother was out on a shopping trip. When his mother returned home from that shopping trip, Joel Jr. ambushed her and stabbed her to death as well. In his notebook, which you can see on the screen, it shows his plan to get his father on the ground and kill him with a knife, and then clean up the mess from his father before his mother got home, and then to kill her in the same way as well. It then says to put her in the shower and point hot water at her body, I guess speeding up decomposition. You can read, like I said, everything on the notebook on the screen. I'll leave it up for a few minutes. When his mother, Lisa, didn't show up for work on Monday, coworkers became concerned and called the police for a welfare check. His sisters would also become concerned as they hadn't been able to reach their parents that weekend. Officers showed up that Monday night for the welfare check, and the front door was locked. Officer Jeremy McCord, who was the lead investigator for this case, made his way through the garage, and instantly he knew something was off. He says when he walked into the kitchen, he noticed that it was very hot throughout inside the house, and that the stove and oven was on with a pot sitting on the stove. He also noticed that there were feces on the floor of the living room, and there were long guns sitting on the dining room table. He made his way upstairs, and he saw knives. And he noticed dark red stains on the floors and walls, and when he looked directly down the long hall into the exercise room, he noticed a severed hand sitting on the floor with no body attached. Also in the room was a severed foot. He said he noticed plastic everywhere on the floor and on the bed, like plastic sheets, and he noticed the blue plastic bins on the floor of the master bathroom. He says inside the bins were an array of body parts that had been semi-liquefied. He says that Joel's mother's head was found in the pot on the stove. And as far as the plastic bins, the bodies, liquefying in acid, it seems like he watched a little bit too much Breaking Bad, because that's what they did. In the notebook, it shows Joel putting together all of the assets of his parents, and it's printed out in fine detail how much money he supposedly would get from insurance, and from selling the house, and how much they had in the bank. He believed he was to get $500,000 just from his mother's life insurance policy alone. He has 3 siblings, though, and I can't find out an exact detail about their will, the parents, so I'm not 100% sure how he believed he was alone, getting this money, as I assume it would be spread out to someone. Maybe they put it in that the most responsible one would get it, which obviously is not Joel Jr., so who knows? Now, he also shows in the notebook that the money from the house would pretty much be worthless because he had planned to burn down the house in order to get rid of any and all evidence after it was all said and done. He was really relying on the insurance money and some of the miscellaneous assets to make this all worth it for him. He left the notebook at the house because he's an idiot. In this notebook as well, there was a list of supplies he would need to pull off the job, and he got those supplies from Walmart. And the security cameras at Walmart saw him because, of course, they did. On the list were multiple killing knives, or what he called killing knives, basically big butcher knives, multiple small knives for carving, a sledgehammer, which he was going to use to crush bones, a food grinder to grind human meat, bleach, plastic bins, plastic sheets, and some other materials that he would use in the killings. He also had it as a last resort to use a gun that his parents owned. He initially wanted to go buy a gun, but he said in the notebook that he would be caught on camera buying a gun and bullets. But I guess he forgot that Walmart has cameras too. After the murders, he turned up the heat to 90 degrees to make the decomposition easier. And I guess that would make dissolving easier if they were more decomposed. I guess that was his plan. But it also seems like he had a lot of plans for this, and he had a hard time choosing one. And I think that was part of the downfall. He couldn't decide on exactly what he wanted to do. He thought actually getting away with this was going to be way more easy than it really was. Of course, it's never as easy as that. And that's part of his downfall. But part of the reason that none of his plans actually worked out very well was that his parents fought back hard, and Joel had some pretty bad cuts on his hands. On Sunday night, he went back to Walmart to get a first aid material, like a first aid kit. And it seems like he was just having a really hard time doing everything that he needed to do that was listed on that in that notebook to get the job done. I mean, because his hands were hurt, so I guess he was having a hard time with cut up hands actually going through with most of his plans. Now, I've read conflicting things about exactly what happened next, but what it seems like is that on Sunday he went back to his apartment, which by the way is a 9-hour drive, and then on Monday he came back to the house, but noticed police there and decided to continue driving past the house. If I'm incorrect about this, let me know. I might be. Again, I've read conflicting sources about exactly the time layout of what happened. It seems kind of weird that he would go all the way back to his apartment and then come back, but maybe that's what happened. Either way, the information about his car was put out into circulation whenever they found the notebook. He was one of the main suspects, and he was caught in Baton Rouge on Tuesday, the 29th. In the trunk of his car, they found a meat grinder and gasoline, which we all knew, or we all know now, what that would be used for, or what it was supposed to be used for. Now, in trial, he just gives a bunch of weird faces. He doesn't show very much emotion at all, except for laughing. He laughs at certain parts. He looks bored at certain parts. Kind of looks like he's trying to fall asleep at a certain point in the trial. But I'm not going to go over everything in trial. Honestly, this was a pretty, open and shut case from a prosecutor's standpoint. One thing he did try to do was he wanted them to make sure that he wanted to die. Now, he gave a recommendation to the judge that if he were to be found guilty, that he would be put to death. Because he says that he does not want to spend out the rest of his life in prison. Now, someone said something on Reddit about this maybe being a way of, if he says that he wants the death penalty, then maybe they won't give it to him because they won't want to give him what he wants. Maybe he did actually want to die. Who knows? Like I said, the whole trial was really weird. He didn't show a bunch of emotion, but he did show emotion a little bit during one part, not too much, but also this is just kind of weird. So he had, as far as we know, one really good friend named Michael, his best friend. They had been best friends for about 10 years. He showed up to trial, and he had been called by Joel Jr. while Joel was in custody, and they played the recording from that. And I'm gonna link everything into the description below so you can check it out for yourself. But it is pretty interesting. The phone call to me almost sounds like a phone call between two lovers. Now, again, I'm not trying to necessarily insinuate this. I don't really know. But if you listen to this phone call, they were very, very close. It could just be two very, very good friends. But, in so many words, Joel Jr. said he didn't exactly state what he did to his parents, but he said that he was going to prison forever, that he might as well be dead to him, that he just wants Michael to have a good life and to move on. They're both very, very emotional during this phone call. And it kind of adds a little bit to the story. It's kind of interesting how that is. I would recommend listening to it as well. Honestly, I would recommend checking out the whole trial. It's all interesting, but honestly, I'll say this: I hate his face. I hate how he acts. I hate how he acted in trial. I mean, I just hate the faces that he would make during trial. And he didn't even look when one of his sisters was making an impact statement. When his sister was talking about his parents and how amazing they were, and how, what he did destroyed the family. He wouldn't even look at his sister while she was saying all this. And Joel Jr. spent 4 years doing everything he could to try and delay the trial. But on October 2nd, 2020, which was only like 13 days ago, 2 weeks ago, Joel Jr. was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder. He was also convicted of 2 counts of felony murder while committing theft and 2 counts of abuse of a corpse. On November 19th, 2020, Joel Jr. will return to Knox County Court so the judge can determine if his 5 life sentences, where he has possibility of parole after 51 years, will be served at the same time or consecutively. Now, honestly, I think it's pretty interesting that he gets parole at all. I mean, it was an open and shut case from the very beginning. What he did was extremely disturbing. He dismembered his parents' bodies. He tried to get rid of them. It was very bad. And I think it's pretty interesting that he even has possibility of parole. But the good news is that he will be in his 70s or 80s before that's possible. Also, he might have to serve his life sentences, back to back. So he'll be in jail forever, pretty much. And by the looks of him, he probably will not survive prison. So honestly, to me, he kind of looks like the Penguin from Batman. I mean, it's kind of a joke, but it actually looks like him. He's disgusting. But anyways, thanks for checking out this video. Again, this is a short video. This is something that, it's easy to process, I think. It's easy to listen to. It doesn't take very long. And more of these will come if you guys like them. I know it's different, but again, like I said before, we will continue releasing our normal videos. Next week, we're releasing a video on Grant Amato, a full-length me and Stefan talking video on Grant Amato. And it's a doozy, because that guy was absolutely just disgusting as well. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.